Good morning, and let's get underway. Welcome to Email Deliverability. I'm David Barnes. I call email deliverability a dark art, and I'd like to kick off with this short video to set the tone for today.
Let me introduce you to your new defense against the dark arts teacher.
Alistair Moody. Ex-Order. Ministry malcontent. And your new defense against the dark arts teacher.
Ordinary wizarding level examinations. OWLs, more commonly known as owls.
I'm here because Dumbledore asked me. End of story. Goodbye. The end.
So a little bit of humour around something that's not so humorous these days. So why is email delivery a dark art? Well, there is an estimated 2.8 million plus email servers in the world. Each is configured differently by mail administrators depending on what rules and what's happening in their environment at the time. Each email server most likely has a different purpose with one common goal: to accept and deliver email. The only commonality these days between most mail administrators is the fight against spam and malicious and malware-related emails. There are over 100 blacklists that spam filters can subscribe to, and the most important part of today's presentation is that the power to give you a poor reputation resides with the mailbox owner or your subscriber. None of these rules are published in their entirety, if at all, by any mail administrators, and so hence the terminology of being a dark art was born, or certainly what I call it. On the screen here we can see certain aspects of what affects email delivery. I was reading, I think, a Google post the other day, and they seem to think there's over 1,400 different ways that your email deliverability can be affected, and we certainly won't be covering 1,400 today, but these, I think, are the most common that people need to look at and refer to, and the first being a known IP address range with public records and a reverse DNS. Reputation is key for the MTA and the domain. So the domain is always an interesting issue here, whether it's the domain of the ESP or the email service provider, which we are, or the mail transfer agent, which is a technology that negotiates the delivery of the mail. And that is definitely, in the case of most email marketing platforms, in the domain of the platform, not in the domain of the users using the platform to send bulk email. Email headers configured to hold key information such as mail originator, purpose, so whether it's an operational email, is it a marketing email, is it a transactional email, and there's another 4 or 5 types, and they're ranked in according to the purpose by many webmail providers and by many email administrators. SPF records, DKIM records, abuse policy, all contained within the email header, are essential for delivery. There's a new authentication standard called DMARC, which was created in 2014. DMARC.org is the reference point. Some mail hosts rely on this and others do not. Hence, again, another dark art. However, as of today, we believe it's a quintessential part of email delivery and where you place in the inbox. Content and subscriber compliance. Whilst I've left these two at the bottom of this slide, they're critical to the success of your email delivery moving forward, and these are two certain areas that you have control over. Reputation. I've split this into two logical areas: out of your control and in your control. Out of your control assumes you do not act as an email service provider, nor have enterprise infrastructure such as Qantas may have. The spam button is an interesting concept I'll cover on the next two screens. But out of your control really is the spam button and user complaints or feedback loops. IP addresses, MTA reputation, unless you're on your own public network as we do, then that's out of your control, or you have a significant enough budget that you want to manage that process. We never recommend it. Again, it's budget related. And then, of course, the setup of your email service provider. Most of those things are out of your control. In your control, best practices, relevant and timely content, subscriber practices, so your subscription process, how do people subscribe to you, whether it's online or offline. There has to be a methodology and it has to meet with the spam legislation. Certainly, Australia has a far more stringent legislation than other countries, Canada as well, and I think I'll cover that later. Authentication, so we briefly covered that with DMARC, SPF and DKIM. And of course, having a published privacy, subscriber and anti-spam policy is highly recommended. So what is a feedback loop? What does this spam button entail? And do I think, which is off script to what I've written for this presentation, do I think it's appropriate or not? The answer is no. And essentially the reason why I believe that the spam button is inappropriate is because it gives people, like my mother, who I love dearly, and my father, who I also love dearly, the ability to be a spam expert. Now, spam for me is unsolicited email, and it is very difficult for, or an illegal email, and it's very difficult for people that don't know the spam legislation to actually understand the idiosyncrasies of what is termed to be inferred consent into a business-to-business context, or whether it is actual, and therefore is it spam or not spam. So many organisations these days fall within the guidelines of the spam legislation by farming emails and relationships off sites like LinkedIn, any publicly available records, because if a publicly available record with an email address is published and the reason for you to communicate with that person is in line with that person's role type, that is called inferred consent according to our laws and the Canadian laws, and therefore is not spam. However, when somebody receives that email and they don't recognise why they're receiving it, or they don't know the terms of inferred consent, then quite often, especially if they have Gmail as their corporate mail, like we do, they can hit report spam and give the organisation that is sending the email, and more importantly, the ESP that is the originator of the email, a bad reputation. Large ISPs and webmail providers provide a mechanism by which their users can flag a campaign or an email as spam. This then registers a complaint against the sender of the email. At minimum, it affects the reputation of the IP address, or better known as the originator of the email. You may think this is your brand, but in effect, it is the ESP or the email marketing platform that you are using. And it's key to really differentiate between what the from address is at this point in the presentation and what the originator is, because we'll cover that when we get to DMARC. The second effect, depending on the feedback loop, i.e. Google, Yahoo, etc., is that the brand reputation of the from address may also be affected. This is not common, but Google has implemented something, again, different to the rest that is becoming quite common. The acceptable complaint rate, and this is important and why we've got it on the screen, is less than 0.1% per provider. So if you were to send 1,000 emails in one campaign, and 500 of those went to Google and the rest went to all different types of email houses, then you have 0.5 complaints that you can have registered. It's not for the total campaign volume. So that's where a lot of people get caught up, and you can really do some harm if you are sending unsolicited email, or you're sending a lot of email, with content that's not relevant. People hit the report spam button, and then what subsequently happens is, you might only have 5,000 or 1,000 delivered to Google, so you can only have one acceptable complaint. Anything over one acceptable complaint, and you're causing reputation damage, not just possibly for your own brand, but for the ESP as well. And so there's a big crackdown on this. At Zulu, we automatically unsubscribe any complaints that we receive from the feedback loops. That's just best practice. What is in your control? The MAWAG best practices is in your control. Relevant and timely content, subscriber practices, authentication, and published policies. So in many cases, it's common sense, but we see clients that come and go because they just indiscriminately e-blast and hope that the same message to 100,000 subscribers will cut through. Those days have gone. Most likely what's happening when you do that is you're causing some brand damage to yourself as well as email reputation harm. And with the new authentication standards being put in play, most of our providers, certainly at the boutique or the mid-tier level, will be encouraging their customers to implement DMARC and implement their own brand email strategy. And therefore, you'll start to see some repercussions if you're just going to continue to blast. Having well-published subscriber practices is important. Australia and Canada have now the world's best anti-spam legislations. Australia has, obviously, since 2003. The Canadians have just caught up. Double opt-in is best practice. If you're a B2B, then use a double opt-in format for your sales team. It's simple, and you can manage their pipelines and predictive sales using these techniques. For retailers, double opt-in is a must. Having double opt-in at online purchases is also advisable. Correct email branding, alignment with your domain, authentication, and unsubscribe functions all must exist and are published in the MAWAG Best Sender Guidelines. We can circulate that link later if people would like to have it. Authentication. This is where it gets tricky, and this is where I'm very proud that we've taken a leading position in what we offer in terms of DMARC. Most ESPs allowed you to send campaigns using the appearance that your email originated from your domain. That wasn't the case. Call it an illusion or another dark art, if you will, because behind the scenes, the mail originator was still the ESP, as you can see on the screen. So here on the screen, Simon White has sent out a campaign for the Australian Israeli Chamber of Commerce using our system, and it actually these days states using via Zulu EDM. And the problem here is that this was a breeding ground for spam and, more importantly, illegal spoof and phishing emails that fooled recipients into credit card and malware issues. So, whether it's our system or another system, and there's plenty out there, and you probably know the more popular ones, the blasting tools, you could simply just create an account, create a campaign or create an email blast, and then use any email domain in the from address and hit send. You could have had a different reply to, which might have been a dodgy Gmail account to collect any password things you want to collect, or any of the illegitimate reasons to create dodgy emails. So DMARC was born. And DMARC stands for Domain-Based Message Authentication, Reporting and Conformance. It is an authentication standard that was introduced in 2014 as a trial to prevent spam and fraudulent email from being sent, especially in bulk. This is an industry initiative designed to solve illegal use of domain messaging, i.e. phishing emails from banks trying to elicit your password, It's taken a long time to adopt. It came in 2014, and we're starting to see, in fact, it's in full flight now, the ramifications of it being implemented. This has been a significant change that email service providers and the industry have been waiting to see which providers would adopt the standard. The big four webmail providers, Gmail, Yahoo, AOL, Hotmail and Outlook, have now fully implemented the requirement. And in 2016, we saw a tightening of this standard and has caught many email service providers being short of being ready. In Australia and other countries, we were insulated for most of this year, mainly because we had good practices and we weren't that reliant on the big four, and our ISPs hadn't taken up this particular standard. Now ISPs such as Big Pond and IONET are enforcing the standard. What does it mean for you? What I've got on the screen here is just a screen grab from the Yahoo Feedback Loop FAQ section. And you can start to see what we as an ESP deal with every day that a lot of people just are unaware of. The first question, how do I get my email delivered into inboxes at Yahoo? How does Yahoo Mail determine a mailer's overall reputation? That in itself is a list as long as your arm with variables, 5 times longer. Is it ridiculous? No, I don't think it is, but having an inconsistency between all of the webmail providers is an interesting position that they all take. They all view this differently, and it becomes certainly it increases over time. It's increasingly hard to get responses out of any of the webmail providers because they are particularly adverse to sharing the information so as to make sure that people are just doing their very best to send something that's timely relevant to subscribers that have subscribed. And we have a relationship with every big webmail provider and major ISP and SpamGuard and all the other spam systems out there and filters. We work on that daily, but it just is a never-ending flow of tweaks and changes and throttling how much email can be sent at any one time. And as you can imagine, when you've got big retail franchises on board, as we do, and we've got affiliates that want to use our system, they are really sending quite a significant amount of mail to the big four and then to the ISPs, depending on the country. And so we need to continually tweak that. But this DMARC implementation, or this DMARC authentication, has really turned the world upside down, because it's no longer acceptable to send email from external of your domain with your domain as the email address. So let me just explain. DMARC needs to be a critical part of your brand, communication and cybersecurity strategies moving forward. To continue to get the benefits of using email as a cost-effective form of marketing and operational messaging, you must implement this standard. Zula Labs is now ready and capable of offering DMARC consulting and additional authentication using our EDM application. If our customers do not wish to use their own domain, we'll be rolling out a shared DMARC solution. In fact, we already have, which means that your email reputation can be affected by any other of our clients. Why is it important? Put simply, the big four webmail providers will not accept email being sent from any domain unless it originates from the MX server or the mail server, or has the 3 authentication methods. Mail that is accepted may have SPF and DMARC marked as okay, but DMARC fail, which may result in that mail being marked down, preventing bulk delivery or giving the sender a bad reputation. What are the benefits of implementing DMARC? Fraud prevention, for sure. That's why this whole thing was invented. DMARC is designated to prevent illegal use of your domain for spoof and phishing purposes. So, what happens with this increase in difficulty to authenticate your domain or your email is it reduces the likelihood of any scams moving forward. And that's really essential when it comes to the delivery of the mail. So when you have the third, I suppose, tick of approval, what it says, especially when the third tick of approval is set to reject, what it says to all of the webmail hosts and the ISPs is that if DMARC fails, reject the email because it's possibly illegal or a scam. And that's what this whole third authentication has been designed to do. It hasn't been particularly well thought through because, again, us as an ESP have come up with a consolidated option, which is problematic in itself because we can now say, well, this email is legitimately coming from Zulu EDM, but our client is, Harvey Norman, for example. And how do you actually know that that was Harvey Norman that signed up? So, and using a Harvey Norman at Zulu EDM email address. So, the only time this really, really adds to the authenticity is when it's coming from, in this case, a Qantas or Harvey Norman email address. It meets all three criteria. And so the likelihood that the mail will be accepted for delivery is far greater, especially when DMARC is set to reject. I can tell you that if you set DMARC to reject straight away, there will be a whole raft of issues within your organisation that will occur from implementing this standard. And so it's not just about bulk email delivery. It's about transactional email, so sending receipts. It's about operational email, perhaps. And I'll give you a great example. We use Google or the Gmail suite, if you will, to run our business across the world, from Asia through to Latin America. And the implementation of DMARC set to fail or reject, sorry, is a term, prevented any of our Google calendars from working. So some of you on today's call would have got two Google Calendar issues. For some reason, we had deleted the domain key from Google in the settings, and we were unable to send out Google Mail. So it's not just a case of putting this record up and it'll all be dandy. There's some planning and there's a whole raft of issues that can come out of it. And the bigger the organisation, the more breakpoints there are. There are subdomain strategies that we can put in play to try and prevent a total disaster at the organisational level. So providing the ability to use your organisation's domain with Zulu and achieve the best email result is a key benefit, and building long-term email brand reputation. That's the key to this, because it's telling the world we don't want to be spoofed or we don't want any phishing emails anymore, so only let through legitimate emails. And so the quicker your organisation takes this up, even if you're a small organisation, it makes it a lot easier to implement. If you're a larger organisation, as I said, there's some more ramifications, but the massive benefit will be embedded deliverability over the long term. But you need to combine it with EDM best practice or MARWAG best sender guidelines, and the result will end up with high conversion, high deliverability, more revenue campaign, or more outcomes if you're a public office. And this is not something that the public office can ignore anymore in terms of any government bodies, because they need to be looking at implementing this now. So to recap, and I think I'm a wee bit ahead of time, which is great, leave some time for some questions, because I know this is the dark arts and I'm the dark arts teacher, if you will. So what I would do from today forward is what's in your control is focus on your subscriber process. If I logged you into our logs, I could tell you and I can show you our customers that are flicking back some really bad campaigns, and so therefore they're getting marked down on whether the subscribers were subscribers from the feedback loop process. Content and segmentation and content relevancy, so making sure that what you're sending out is relevant to your recipient. It's not acceptable to send out 100,000 emails to your entire database, if that's your entire database, and have the same message. It's unacceptable. So use the tools that are available today, conditional content, segmentation, even sending smaller campaigns. Blasting is fine if you want to use that term, as long as you're sending something relevant to a smaller section of your database, but indiscriminate e-blasting is what is killing a lot of organisations out there, and therefore killing their reputation in email delivery. And the third, and I believe the most critical part of this, is to enable your retailers or the public office or anyone that's sending email to Google, Hotmail, whoever, is to implement DMARC and to have a really good look at it. So that's a 25-minute view of what's happening in the industry. I'm going to open it up to